The previous basket is under review.
Transfer portal season is officially in the books. It's been quiet for a few weeks. We were waiting for that final flare-up around the draft. Finally got it. Milan Momcilovic, Tounde Yessoufou coming back to college, headed to new destinations. And that is going to be the focus of our fourth and potentially final transfer portal fits video, Fawcett. We'll do obviously some deeper team breakdowns throughout the summer and fall the way we did last year. But wanted to do some quick hitters throughout the cycle. And I thought, this timing made sense to hit a couple of the late guys and a couple other guys that we were intrigued by and hadn't gotten to just yet. But yeah, any initial takeaways from the draft decision deadline and a couple of potential studs coming back to college?
Yeah, I think it went. I feel bad saying this and maybe it just comes across as like arrogant or whatever, but I just felt like there wasn't going to be a lot of drama, and that's of course what kind of happened. It just seemed like all logic was in the way of a lot of these guys coming back to college, and that's what happened for most of them. And I didn't feel like anything was a major surprise, but I feel like something that maybe could have been argued theoretically, like, oh, these guys all should go back to college for these reasons, it kind of bared out. And there's a lot of guys that I'm really excited to see again. And I think that it's going to be great for college basketball, where we could talk several issues facing the sport, but one of the ones that I think is the biggest, though it has gotten talked about less, is it's like not the most apocalyptic or sexy, but it's just like, yeah, like casual fans struggle with the roster movement. They struggle with stars from the game being gone and people having to learn a whole bunch about a new set of stars. And I think that for a lot of those guys to come back is really exciting. We'll talk about a couple today, both kind of directly as well as kind of tangentially on some of these teams of guys that are returning to. But yeah, I thought it was a great NBA draft deadline for college basketball.
Yeah, totally agree. And, I think, again, like the money has just changed things. And I'm probably more conservative than others on this front. Just from the standpoint that, like, look, at the end of the day, I understand the pull to the NBA for some of these guys, but I also think the safety and security of just like making your big cash in college is hard to beat. And I think you felt that for Momcilovic and for Yessoufou. We're going to talk about Momcilovic first and to kind of give context to the conversation, I think, with Milan's draft decision before the Kentucky decision. I wanted to compare him to someone who is not maybe a perfect comparison to who he is as a player, but like has some similarities, would probably have like a hopefully similar role should he make the NBA. And that's Dean Wade. Dean Wade was a, long 4-year college guy, has grinded his way into like a pretty valuable role player in the NBA. Dean Wade, through his now 7 NBA seasons, has made $24 million. He only just now this season at $6.5 million might have broken what Milan Momcilovic will make this year at Kentucky. And Milan will have another year of college basketball should he want it with the new eligibility rules, right? Like, I don't think, like, again, Dean Wade took a ton of work for Dean Wade to get to a point where now he can go battle for like a real contract. I don't know if I was, again, Tyler Tanner, Tounde Yessoufou, Milan Momcilovic, Alex Condon, especially some of the younger guys that have several years. Like, I don't know why I wouldn't just bank the guaranteed 15 or the guaranteed 20 over the next 3 years and then go to the NBA. Like, I don't think it's going to be exponentially harder for Tounde Yessoufou to make the NBA as a 22-year-old as it will be as a 19-year-old. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my kind of prior on the conversation. And so I was pleased to see a lot of those guys come back and make smart decisions. Don't blame anybody for going, right? It's the NBA. It's the dream, especially if you know you're going to get picked, right? Like Malik Thomas, people would say, oh, like Malik Thomas would be a first-round pick in the NBA draft. Like, how could you tell somebody who grew up dreaming of this to not go be a first-round pick in the NBA draft? Like, I get it. But I also see just like the stability of like the guaranteed 15 and then I worry about the other stuff from there. That's kind of how I view it. We'll see if the market stays this way, but I think if it does, that's the conversation. And I think that was a big part of Milan Momcilovic's decision. Like at the end of the day, he knew, look, I could probably get drafted now. My stock's probably as high as it'll get, just from a standpoint of I made a ton of shots last year. But I got to come back and make the money. And Kentucky certainly had a lot of money waiting for him. They needed him. They needed a splash, probably more than anything. And he gives them arguably the best shooter in college basketball. I know there's been a lot of talk, Fawcett, about Mark Pope's best teams being super driven by elite shooting. You think about Jackson Robinson at BYU and Kentucky, Kobe Brea, his first year at Kentucky. Some of the earlier teams at BYU had sharp shooters, and I think that has made people view it as sort of this natural fit. I'm curious your perspective on that, and if it's as clean cut as some people have portrayed it to be.
Yeah, that's interesting to mention, because the thing about these pure shooters, these gunners, is like you can't just kind of hope the ball finds them and hope if you just run regular motion stuff, the ball just kind of finds your shooter at a good opportunity. You need to create these catch and shoot attempts. You need to run guys off screens. And that's where I thought Iowa State did an amazing job, really like running him, using him as a designated hitter. It's like when he's on the floor, which is a lot, guys are just trying to find him. Guys are headhunting his man, constantly trying to pin in for him. They run set plays for him constantly. They use him as a back screener to get him a screen action. Like they use him a lot. And I think that's how you absolutely need to use this style of player. You can't just be like, okay, now let's go put him in the corner while we run high ball screen. And that's been something that is obviously really effective for them. But when you look back at these Pope teams, they actually don't use a lot of off-screen type actions. They don't use a lot of running dribble handoff stuff for these players. They do a little bit, but when you actually look at the numbers and you watch them play, they did get a lot of those 3-point attempts for the Jackson Robinsons of the world, some of those shooters back to BYU too. Like still a lot of it was like, yeah, they played this 5 out. Kind of one of the reads would be like, oh yeah, maybe you pin away for this guy instead of getting into splits. And it's actually kind of interesting when I look at these guys that had really good percentages at BYU. I often kind of go back now and look at it and it's like, oh, it's because their volume wasn't probably what it could have been because they didn't use them a lot. And again, full credit, they still like got a bunch of 40+% 3-point shooters, but I just don't feel like Pope at this point has like really shown a great ability to utilize guys that are these elite catch and shoot threats. And there's a couple things I did really like. You're seeing one of those sets there, but again, I just, especially looking at the last 2 years at Kentucky, and not that they had a weapon like that, but I really think that Pope is going to have to utilize this weapon a little bit more. And I think a lot of the discussion too that is kind of surrounding Momcilovic, and this is where I'll ask you as well, is just where he's going to fit defensively, and is he going to have to play 4, and like what's that going to mean for Kentucky's defense? And this is one area where like I actually do feel like Momcilovic is a better defender than people think. And like, yes, you can go and find all kinds of film of him getting scored on, but Iowa State was incredible defensively, and teams were like, we are just going to try to go at Momcilovic every single time because the other 4 guys on the floor are demons. So you might look at the volume of scoring or volume of points that came off Momcilovic being the primary defender. But, you know, watching the film, I thought he competed, did a pretty good job of keeping guys in front, was able to use his length to make up for lack of physicality at times. And I certainly don't think he's a big positive on that end, but I don't actually think that it's this massive negative. But again, going back to just like kind of the original piece I was kind of thinking about when, and I love that you mentioned Dean Wade and his career earnings, because the NBA has figured something out that college basketball I don't think has yet. And that's like, what advantage does an elite catch and shoot player have for you? What are those guys worth? Now, you did see that run in the NBA where guys like Duncan Robinson were getting massive contracts. Luke Kennard got a massive contract relative to those were quickly seen as some of the worst contracts in the sport. And you did see again some guys still getting like getting drafted highly with that being their primary skill, maybe like a Grady Dick. Well, like he's fallen out of the rotation in the end. So it's one of those things that I feel like the elite catch and shoot player had a ton of value 10 years ago when the alternative was playing someone who shot 32%, 31% from 3 on the wing. Well, now even guys that are okay shooters shoot 35%. So I mean, of course, Momcilovic just had an absolutely absurd season, but like, even like, what is the marginal value of the difference between a 35% 3-point shooter and a 40%? And this is just an archetype of player that I would personally not pay to be the cream of the crop in college basketball. And I mean, we can get into, of course, like, you can't view guys and what they're getting paid in vacuums. Like, these are markets, and markets change, and what he is worth to Kentucky in June is very different than what he might be worth to someone else in May. But yeah, the fact of the matter is, I think this is like this can be a difficult archetype of player to utilize. I thought it went as stellar as possible at Iowa State, and yeah, the results were really good. But I just see there being a lot more downside for Kentucky, and I certainly think he's going to play really well. I am not sure he is the best player in the portal like he's maybe being discussed at. I'm not sure he's going to be a first team All-American like he's maybe getting discussed at. I don't know if he's going to even replicate the points per game that he did at Iowa State. And I mean, just the smart money would be on he doesn't shoot the three as well as he did, because that season was incredible, but I still think he's going to shoot it really well. But yeah, so yeah, I've got a lot of takes, as you can hear, but those are some of my thoughts.
No, it's a fascinating conversation, because I think generally speaking, everyone would agree. Like, I think if you called, 20 high major GMs and you gave them like condition of anonymity, like what archetype, like of the like potential stars available, what archetype would you be least excited to pay at, All-American level? I think Momcilovic would pretty much be the exact, like, would be the lowest option. Like, no one would be dying to pay that. And it is probably objectively true that, if you were starting from scratch, you could probably like moneyball your way to 70% of Milan Momcilovic for 30% of the price, something like that, right? 80% of Milan Momcilovic for 50% of the price. I think that's 100% true. It's also, though, where I think college basketball not being a traditional market and not having a salary cap, like it does kind of change the conversation, because like there were no options for Kentucky otherwise. And like, it isn't, I've said this, I've talked to a ton of like high level coaches about this. Like, it's frustrating that some of the like smart margins moves don't really move the needle in college basketball at the top of the sport, because it's a zero-sum game. Either you're talented enough to win the national championship and make a Final Four and do all the things, or you're not that talented, you're not that good, and like no one's patting you on the back for being like a smart steward of the finances, right? And if you're Kentucky and you're in the spot that they were in, which is that they clearly had a hole in their rotation, they needed like a high-level guy, they needed like a theoretical best player on a team, a guy who had proven it at the highest level. Like, there was no alternative of like, oh, well, we could pay a point guard instead. We could pay a center instead. And there was no, like, quite frankly, there were no like good wings that you could pay $2 million instead of Milan's 6, let's say, or 7, or wherever the number ended up. I'm not going to report anything. I know it was very high, right? Like, there was no other options at this point in the cycle. And so because of that, yeah, like I'm all in. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense. And like, if you're Kentucky, I think Parrish and Norlander kind of referred to it as like it's like the sleep well at night card. Like, you pay Milan $7 million, not just because Milan is an incredible shooter. You're paying him that so that like for the next 5 months, people don't talk about how you can't recruit and how you should get fired, right? And like that's a huge part of this conversation. But yeah, no, I think from the basketball side of things, from the fit standpoint, I tweeted this. Like, the conversation that's fascinating to me is, if you are Kentucky, do you play him at the 4 regularly and sort of zag while the rest of the sport is playing bigger, more physical, right? Again, think about like the best teams in the country and how they're trying to build the Michigans, the Floridas. Like, it's bully ball to the max. Like, do you want Milan Momcilovic consistently matched up with Alex Condon, with JP Estrella, et cetera, and try to pull those guys away? Or, do you play him at the 3? Even if you play him at the 3 and you play Ousmane Ndiaye coming over from Italy, like, Ousmane Ndiaye is not overly physical. So Kentucky as their team will probably lack physicality around Malachi Moreno. And I'm fascinated to see how Pope decides to build the lineups. My gut feeling is that unless Ndiaye is shooting the cover off the ball, that they will end up with Cam Williams on the floor a ton as the wing, and then Milan as the 4. But that also, again, like there's so much trickle down, right? Like how good are Diallo and how good will Diallo and Wilkins be, right? If both of those guys really live up to the hype, and this is why we'll probably do a full Kentucky video at some point in the offseason. If both Diallo and Wilkins are really good, like Kentucky is paying for them to be, then at the end of the day, you're probably going to find ways to put shooting around them, put shooting around 2 stud creators, and then have a 5 that can roll to the rim right now, right? If those guys struggle, then it's like, all right, how can we have as much positional size and length and still space it well? But like, all right, then maybe it's one of Zoom and Wilkins, and then it's Cam Williams and Milan and Njai or Justin McBride to bring some physicality. Fascinated generally by kind of like the machinations there. But yeah, I think the easy summary of Milan is he's clearly a very good player. Like he's like an almost no bust guy. I think, is that fair to say? Like there's no world where you're like, man, Milan Momcilovic is like straight up bad. It's just, yeah. Is there a ceiling to go the next level from what he was this past year to a top 5 or top 10 player in the sport? And I don't know that there is without him shooting 60% from 3, which probably won't happen.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of floor of it, I guess, or kind of talking about floor, kind of talking about, which is not necessarily his floor as a player, but even just how it could work for Kentucky. Like, correct me if I'm wrong or you disagree, but I think there's a world out there where he averages 16 points a game, shoots 45% from 3, and Kentucky's still the 25th best team in the country. And that's kind of the thing too, where, I feel like he is going to get the ceiling on that is like, it's kind of hard to imagine him being a 21, 22 point per game player, but that would be incredible. I just think, yeah, ultimately going back and watching how Kentucky played, even some of those 5-out BYU teams that were really, really good offensively. So I'm not saying like, oh, they were bad because they didn't have a player like Momcilovic. And now I'm just curious to see, what does that Kentucky offense look like? And if I'm them, I am really thinking about how are we making teams guard him on every single possession and have him be he needs to be the centerpiece in my opinion. Or if he's not, he's just going to be, he could be that, spot up corner shooter where maybe he averages 14 points per game and hits 46% of his threes, but it doesn't bring grab. Like he needs to be like, he needs to be averaging 16 or 17, but teams are concerned with how they're going to guard him coming off of Peja actions and staggers and empty side flares. And they need to be constantly chasing him around. And if they switch, what are you doing? If you're Kentucky, how do you play on those? Like, yeah, if you're bringing in a guy like this, you need to structure everything around him. Will Kentucky do that is my question, but it becomes one of the most fascinating kind of things for me to watch. Like that's a team on like opening night or whatever their opening night is, that's when I'm like, I'm going to be locked in because I really want to know what they're doing and how they play. And I think, like you mentioned, there's a reason we are almost certainly going to be doing a full Kentucky video here closer to the season.
And it's certainly not because the Kentucky fan base is rather rabid and will consume the content in droves. So it has nothing to do with that. All right. Yeah, like big picture, Bojan Momcilovic and into Yessoufou. I think the transition here is natural in that the NBA draft or college guys that have been in the portal and been the last guy standing and have been the big payday late, traditionally, like the deal has not gone well for the school. It doesn't mean that the player hasn't been good. It's that they haven't really matched the hype. And I'm curious with both Yessoufou and Momcilovic whether those guys are geared to do that. And I think Yessoufou is a fascinating one in particular because he's someone that the numbers say, man, this guy can really, really score. And like, there's no question he has. Like he did it at Baylor. He was the all-time high school leading scorer in California. I think just got overtaken by Jason Crow, but he that was a record that had stood for years upon years before he took it. He's built like an Adonis. He's massive. He's physical. He's an incredible athlete. But like the film is very unpolished at times, and I think picked a good situation for him at St. John's where he will get coached. Some of those rough edges will get buffed out, and if nothing else, he has like a pretty stable floor. It's like a guy who could just fly around and be great in transition, get up and down the floor. But this is not necessarily the finished product, like true polished bucket getter that you might think a guy who averaged 18 a game as a freshman in the Big 12 might be. And I'm interested by that contrast for sure.
Yeah, like you said, a lot of times you're like you see athletes like this and you're just kind of like think, okay, we got to like teach him how to like put the ball in the hoop somehow. And the way that he kind of still has a lot of touch is incredible. And you see kind of the mix of that in transition, but it's also quite funny watching a lot of his transition possessions where like as the coach in me is like, man, like you got the ball, like throw the ball ahead. You've got teammates ahead of you, like make a play for someone else. And he is just like tunnel vision on the rim, but then he scores it. So that shows a lot of, again, that like individually talent he has, but also the fact that like, yeah, this is still a player that like probably needs to learn a little bit of how to play winning basketball, but it's just a perfect fit to go to St. John's, who plays so fast and does exactly that, throws the ball ahead, is unselfish in transition. And thinking about Yessoufou being someone who could end these plays a little bit by having unselfish teammates push that ball to him and let him finish, or hey, if he wants to push that ball forward, he's probably getting it back. Like that's going to be a really good setting for him. And seeing some of those big physical wings at St. John's and how they played, I think there's a pretty good kind of analog to how you could see Yessoufou playing. And one of the things that St. John's did with those physical wings at the three is they love to post him up. And that's something, again, you don't see a lot of teams that are really looking to operate from the low block from their threes. And if Yessoufou plays the three, whatever you want to call them, wings, whatever you want to say, St. John's had big wings that they loved to utilize as post-up players and play through. And that was a huge part of the game of Yessoufou at Baylor that I don't think got talked about a lot. And you can kind of see it in his play types. And even just, going back to watching some of his bigger games, it was him just absolutely bullying guys. You see these like horns alignments where they would just let him duck in from the corner. Something you see in Europe all the time in mismatches. I love it. And to see his kind of ability as a scorer from there and the mismatches he could create, I think that's going to be kind of a perfect match for St. John's, who is, again, one of the teams that posted up the most in the country. Again, a lot of it came from the five, but a lot of it still came from the three. And I think there's going to be good space for him to operate from there. And then kind of the last piece, I mean, if you're going to play for Patino, like you better guard. And you do see that a lot from Yessoufou with those physical gifts and someone who loves to create chaos and go for steals and make things happen. And will that need to be reined in? Like, hey, we'll see. But I think that someone like Patino is going to be happy with some of those defensive instincts and maybe try to wind it down a little bit and make him a little bit more controlled. But the physical gifts and the energy level are really, really there. So I don't know if you want to put Yessoufou in that kind of like more underrated players in the country, because like everyone kind of like knew who he was and how good he was, but like just a lot of people weren't really watching Baylor last year. And he's someone that, every time I watch, and going back to do this project, I really enjoyed everything. And like, there's a lot of polish to be done, but still a player that I think is going to be really, really good. And I do think the fit at St. John's is just about perfect.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree on the fit. I think the thing that's fascinating to me with the fit is I trust that Patino's the right coach for him. I'm curious what happens in an environment where you're playing with two other sort of ball stopper type guys. Like Ian Jackson has never been one to pass the rock. There are some clips of Donnie Freeman, and I get that Donnie Freeman was in a really bad environment at Syracuse that were not good. But like the defense is absolutely begging Donnie Freeman to pass the basketball. Like they are so loaded up to him, and he is not even thinking about getting rid of it. And I think that part of like I don't think Tounde is like an overly selfish player, but I did feel like there was a lot of like his turn, my turn at Baylor with him and Cam Carr. And I worry that you end up in a similar kind of environment here at St. John's where it's just, man, like we have to play together. And I trust that Patino can get some of that out of them. And the other thing I'll say, the big difference is that there's a real point guard. Like St. John's has Quinn Ellis. Quinn Ellis is like maybe not the most like elite offensive like scoring point guard, but he is like a high level proven starter in the Euro League who wants to distribute and wants to be the guy that kind of sets everybody up. And I hope that maybe his presence can help everybody and lift everybody up and take some of those more selfish tendencies out of everybody's game, because they know they'll get it back because they're playing with a point guard that wants to spread it all around. So I like that for sure with him. I think the concern from an NBA standpoint is just, again, like, is his game too reliant on just pure power? Can he make decisions? Can he, polish some things up? And like, in many ways, that is very comparable to the guys who have starred for Pitino the last couple of years, right? Like RJ Lewis just like overpowered people. Kadari Richmond overpowered people. Bryce Hopkins and Dylan Mitchell by the end of the year were just like head down to the rim. Like it's a very effective college archetype, even if it's not in the NBA. And I think from that lens, yeah, Tounde was smart to take his money and hopefully continue to get better, right? But like his floor is darn good college basketball player, I think.
Yeah, that seems right about right. And again, that's why you bring in athletes like that with that kind of physical upside. But it's also, yeah, like he is so unique. And I like you watch him play, and he's like a bit of a bowling ball. And then you look at his like just like raw points production. And it's just like unlike what you would expect for or normally see from some of these guys that are these big physical wing kind of archetypes. But yeah, you can see the sky high upside there, but it's also like, yeah, kind of a rare player where I feel like the ceiling is really high and the floor is really high, and what happens from there, we'll see. But that is, I've made my thoughts known on St. John's offense in some past videos. So that is one thing that I'm still just like, yeah, very interested in bringing in the piece like an Ellis, who I think is really, really good. Yeah, and makes me start to think about if we'll be doing a St. John's video as well. But a little bit of a different feeling roster while also feeling kind of really still traditional to the types of guys that Pitino likes. So that'll be an interesting one. But I do think, yeah, from just like the toughness, physicality, transition, post up wing piece, it's like, yeah, like that just check boxes everywhere for St. John's to check.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Two more guys we're gonna hit probably quicker. This has been a longer video. I wanted to talk about Leroy Blyden to Kansas. This is one I've been excited about after watching him in the MAC tournament. I had seen him all year, but that game particularly, those games in the conference tournament, he was just electric and sort of solidified like, yeah, he has to go, right? There's a lot of freshmen that I would say, hey, it's smart to like go be the dude and make yourself a multi-million-dollar player by staying for a sophomore year. I think it was pretty obvious. Like he was the dude already. He was too good for the league. It was time. And I know that Bill Self was asked this week about who he was most excited about that they had added other than Tyron Stokes, and he brought up Leroy Blyden. So I'm excited to watch him. I think he'll play on and off the ball at times, just like he did at Toledo, alongside Talon Kinney. He did it at Toledo with Sonny Wilson. Very, very frail, has some polishing to do, but like the scoring talent is undeniable with Leroy Blyden.
Yeah, that's something that just strikes you right away is the individual skill. And that's where he did, like you said, play with the ball, a little bit off the ball. But I think that when you're looking at what he did really well, it was that offensive creativity with the ball in his hands. And whether it's pulling up, whether it's getting to the rim and surprising everyone with a dunk, brings a lot of excitement there. And I think when he's just wired to score, that's certainly when Toledo was at its best. And I think the different kind of number of ways you see him making things happen, you can kind of see how he's kind of also built like a perfect kind of like microwave score. And I think that that's going to really fit what Kansas is going to need and is looking for out of that position. I think the things with him that I'm a little bit more concerned about is some of the distribution and ability to make plays and pick and roll. Like we saw on that one, it was effective, but he like really kind of like got himself in trouble, had to leave his feet to make a play. And that's kind of just one of the things you see from him a lot is he kind of like gets himself into trouble. And then some of the really fun offensive creativity comes from the fact that he like gets himself into tough situations and then makes plays out of it. But then there's a lot of times he also gets himself in trouble and doesn't make plays out of it. And really has to like leave his feet there. It's like a 77, a double drag, and he tries to split it, which is just not the read you ever want to see in that act. So there's things like that you just like, he needs to be able to, like a running back that just like needs to see the right hole and go through it and not try to like juke 100 times. There's a little bit of that to his game. But again, I say this not trying to like kill the kid. Like he was awfully effective as a young player, and he's got a lot of room to grow and now has a really good coach to kind of make it happen. And I think on the defensive end, I also have some concerns. You're watching a lot of these plays in pick and roll where I really thought he was bad, and he needs to learn to be more physical at the point of attack. He needs to be someone who gets into the ball, can pressure the ball a little bit more. He needs to be able to dictate the direction of the ball and not get rejected. So there are issues there. So overall, it's just like, yeah, he's a young guard. He's got young guard problems, but he also has like young guard potential and electricity. And I loved watching him in scoring mode. And it's just one of those things that like, yeah, if he was kind of being banked on to be like a Kansas point guard, the Kansas point guard, the start, like I'd probably be like, okay, like that concerns me a little bit, but there's a lot to like, and hearing that from Bill Self is really interesting. And I also think it's yeah, like there's no issue I see that's like, oh man, this guy's hopeless. Like it's stuff that I think can be corrected, and I think he'll do really well. So very interesting player, really fun to watch.
Yeah, the one thing that I think a lot of people will point out is that a lot of the Toledo guards that have transferred up have sort of had underwhelming underwhelming seasons, right? You think about Marion Jackson, who went to Arizona State. He, was like a sub off. He was an incredible player in the MAC. He goes to Arizona State. He's like a sub 100 offensive rating guy on a bad team. Like the best examples, Ray J. Dennis. He went to Baylor. He was productive, but like again, Baylor didn't have an amazing year. He was, he was a good player. He's playing with other really good players. Yeah, I don't know. Like, the last couple of years, you think about like Raheem Moss was a bust at Oregon. Dante Maddox was just okay at Xavier. It hasn't been like a super lucrative bounce up path. I think he's as talented, if not more, than all of these guys. And I think the other thing that I would point to is the one example that didn't end up transferring up was Ryan Rollins, who just stayed in the draft. And now he's an incredible young talent had a great year, I believe, in Milwaukee with the Bucks after bouncing around a little bit. So I don't want to say like, oh, this is just like a system quarterback situation. So don't want to say that. But that is one thing that does concern me. It's like, man, this has been a good situation for a lot of young guards. Has been a great situation for smaller kind of bucket getters. It hasn't always translated. What does that look like going to a blue blood in Kansas? And I worry he maybe overjumped it, but I do think the talent's real. There's also, again, there's this interesting conversation that I'm gonna like. I'm gonna drop like a bomb, and then I'm going to move on. I just don't love the concept of paying a guy at like their true peak value, right? Leroy Blyden was a fun player to watch in AAU. Like I compare him to like, okay, Caden Magwood, who is like a top 60 player in the class, went to Auburn, small guard, shifty, had great on-ball talent, didn't play. Now he's transferring down to Murray State and like isn't even guaranteed to start at Murray. And like Caden Magwood was just better than Leroy Blyden on the circuit. Like they did the same things. Caden Magwood is a better prospect. It was pretty obvious. So like, does 1 year of Leroy Blyden just like tearing it up in a system where everybody tears it up, that makes him a Kansas player, potentially a Kansas starter? Like he might be. Don't get me wrong. There's a good chance he is. But like, as like it just feels like you're buying a stock at its absolute peak. That for me, like my GM hat, I get a little worried about that. But I do think the talent is very real.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. And I guess like that's one thing where it's at least it's not like they were building their roster around this guy's going to be our starting point guard and we're going to need him to be super high volume and everything there. But I think, like you said, it probably would have like maybe a little bit less of a jump you probably think would have been better for Blyden. But it's also like, hey, yeah, Kansas comes calling. I can certainly understand the decision from him. And I predict a lot of situations where he has some awesome games. He scores like 16, 17, 18 off the bench and has some huge electric plays. And I think there might be times where he has 4 turnovers in 12 minutes and Self just like, or even there's going to be times where he probably comes in the game and scores on the first 2 possessions, but also gives up 2 on the other end. And just a little bit of that growing situation. But like, will this be kind of a multi-year Kansas guy? We'll see. But everyone loves the small electric guard, so it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Last one. This video is running long here. Want to talk about Vanderbilt and their new look front court. We've been holding off on talking about them until we knew if Tyler Tanner was back. He is. That's exciting. They've completely kind of shifted their team and their not necessarily the philosophy, but last year's team was small and loaded with shooting around Tanner. And this year, and I thought at times like they just kind of got worn down by the schedule, by the SEC, the grind of it. And you've clearly swung the opposite direction with how they've built this team. This group will be big, potentially play like 3 bigs at once, all with different skill sets. And even their guards that they added, you think about like T.O. Barrett from Mizzou. T.O. Barrett is like a bulldog downhill guard. He is not, a gunner from the perimeter. Ace Class does some of that stuff that Duke Miles did, but they look very different, just kind of vibes wise, I think, as a roster, and thought it'd be interesting to look at the front court pieces and how they might interact with the Vanderbilt system that I would refer to as one of the most opportunistic offenses in college basketball.
Yeah, I think if I had to say, I have decided that Vanderbilt was my favorite team to watch in college basketball. Again, I'm not saying they were the best, but like they were the team I enjoyed watching the most. And there was certainly a lot of frustration in them playing really good basketball only to give up an offensive rebound, to get back cut, and or someone drives and like it's probably contained and contested at the rim in another setting, but their roster limitations just kind of kept that from happening. So you can watch some of those plays here where like, yeah, they guard really well and it still just ended in them giving up a bucket. And that was really frustrating in a lot of settings. But then you can start to see with these new guys what they're all, going to bring and how they're going to address some of those issues kind of by committee. And I think that's going to be really exciting and hopefully cover up some of the holes that we just watched for a number of minutes here. And I think it's kind of going to start with the physicality of Williams Adams, who I kind of like as someone who plays a similar style to these, like still like a little bit more like below the rim bangers that they had last year that were still like really good, but he's still just like that next side. He's just still a little bit longer, a little bit more physical, a little bit more athletic. And he's going to bring a piece that they can throw it down into. He's a very efficient post player, not on huge volume, but he has an element where he can short roll, go play off the bat, and he can like bring the fight a little bit from a physicality standpoint, which they didn't have as much. And then, Burke Buchanan, like someone who like brings the kind of shooting and that pick and pop threat. And, you mentioned we wanted to see if Tyler Tanner was back. Well, now that he's got this kind of elite pick and pop kind of guy, someone who can space the floor and change the geometry of the floor, I think that's going to be really big. And I think the big piece with him as well is we talked about how much they just like gave up at the rim last year. I think this is where you get a little bit more of that like shot blocking, where it's not like he's like the great athlete, great anticipation. He's going to go and swat something into the third row, but like he just uses his length, like all these blocks where like he stands, he is long, and he gets blocks because of it. Like that's what they need. They don't like, I mean, yeah, sure. The like elite shot blocker, like that's great. But like, I think he's going to be adequate. And then talking about Tyler Tanner being back and like, what do you need around him? Well, here's your lob guy in Dak. Like this is someone who is going to be the recipient of so many alley-oops, so many back cuts, someone who, when a team puts two on the ball, that Tyler can just like find this guy for an instant 2 points because you throw it up anywhere near the square, he's going to dunk it. So three good pieces and kind of a nice unit of front court depth here with three kind of like drastically different like body and play styles.
Yeah, that's to me the biggest thing. You just get different looks. You could play Berke could play the 5 for stretches with Williams Adams. You can go smaller if you want, get more guards on the floor. Even Barrett can guard up the lineup. That's valuable. I do think you're betting on Berke hopefully bouncing back as a shooter statistically. Just 24% last year, sort of fell out of favor as a shooter. Didn't take a ton for stretches of the year. And then would come back and fire him up a little bit. Like he's someone that I believe in as a shooter. I think that's a big reason why you take him, is you think he'll make shots. But Vandy's probably not going to want him bombing away if he's at 24% again next year, and I don't think he will be. But that's part of the conversation. I don't think he needs to be a great offensive player. I think like the terminology you use to bring the fight, and you refer to it with Williams Adams. I think it's true with all these guys, but particularly Berke and Williams Adams. Like they just needed more of that. They needed more dog. They needed more toughness. And I think those guys are all going to be willing to run the floor and get rewarded with Tanner that way. I do wonder if Berke doesn't shoot it great, if T.O. Barrett doesn't shoot it great, what does the spacing look like for Tanner? Again, there's no Tyler Nickel out there. There's no like true bombers, just like widening, opening it up and forcing people to stay attached. I do think you'll see defenses dare Berke to beat them, but sort of at the same time, like I think where Tanner's truly magical is in the open floor, and having guys that can rim run and he can throw lobs to. I think that will be very valuable. So I'm excited about this group. I think they're a top 15 type of team, and Tanner just an incredible talent, like a guy who elevates everybody around him. I don't think when you look at Vanderbilt's roster from this past season, like their pedigrees, none of these guys were like studs coming into Vandy. They were good players that became great in a great system around a great point guard. And I think this group is bigger, more athletic, more talented any that Byington's had, and excited to see if they can translate that into a special year. They were fun to watch last year. I think they could be even more league pass this coming year.
Yeah, I think so. I realized I mentioned Buchtensell as an elite pick and pop guy, and that was not the terminology I should have used, certainly. And I think looking back at it too, like some of the holes kind of in his game, when we talk often on the show just about like the different types of shots. So he also failed to make a transition 3 last year, and like that really dragged down his percentage. And the year prior, his spot and shoot numbers or spot up numbers weren't so good, but this year his like pure catch and shoot were better. So I do think that's going to be quite the kind of swing skill for him, but it's nice that he'll be able to at least bring some of that rim presence defensively just with that length. And I think when you're just building around Tanner to be like, okay, this is a guy we hope can pick and pop. Williams Adams can be a short roll guy, and then Dak is someone you can throw that ball up to in the pick and roll and be a lob threat. It's all fun tools for him, and I think that'll also be just interesting to see the synergy, which one Tanner finds himself a little bit more, who he likes to play with, who he likes to get into 2-man action with. That'll be big. But like mentioned last year, I thought they're my favorite team to watch in college basketball. I think they will enter maybe with that preseason number 1 ranking for me, but I'm open to all comers.
Yeah, no question. The other thing I would say with Berkay real quick, and then we'll wrap it up. Like, I don't look at how much players average like points and rebounds per game like very often at all. Like the only time it really comes up in like my looking at players is just for like when I'm writing articles and like referencing, oh, this guy averages 18 a game, whatever. When Berkay went in the portal, I was like, man, like that's like a elite transfer. Like he's a really good player. Like I've watched a lot of Nebraska. He's super impactful. And then like I looked and I was like, oh geez, like Berkay only averaged like 6 and 6. Like in my head, Berkay was like had a way better year than he did. And there's probably something to that, right? Like I've watching him enough, watching the impact that he made on winning. I'm a believer in him beyond the numbers, even if he is, as you said, probably not a statistically elite shooter by any means, but someone that has that in his arsenal for sure. So this was a fun one, Fawcett. I really enjoyed it. I know we went a little deeper on Tounde and on Milan, I think, than we've done with some of the other videos. So hopefully everybody enjoys that. Please like and subscribe. Check out the channel on YouTube. Also subscribe to Basket Under Review, the website, the Discord. It's all phenomenal. It's a 24/7, 365 home for everything you're looking for from a college basketball standpoint. There is nothing like it in the marketplace. So I encourage you all to check that out. Check out the other great work that people are doing over there. We will see y'all soon with more Scout Team content.